All right, here we are. This is episode 8. I got this deep tank shirt on, the long sleeve for the new season because it's fall, and pretty soon it'll be Halloween. And who knows, maybe by the time I post this, Halloween will already be over. But maybe not. We'll see. Depends on whether or not I have to edit any of this stuff. Um, I took a little bit of. No, I'm not gonna lie. Nobody fucking criticized me for my fucking editing. Nobody cares. Nobody watches this shit. It's alright. I'm not gonna pretend. I'm not gonna play the victim here. Anyway, I'm just gonna try and do it live, man. It's not gonna happen. I'm gonna edit this fucking video. It just happens. I watch it and I see how stupid I look, and I just have to go back and try and erase history. I try and fix my stupidity and make myself not look like such a goober. But I think most people have that experience. But I have it probably more than usual. Anyway, so usually when I come on here, I talk about books a lot. And I'm not going to talk about books as much today. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I have no idea. I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. This is now almost like my first episode, where if you were to watch my first episode, I don't recommend it. It's pretty cringy. The first time I went back and watched that episode, I got really freaked out because I look like I'm ready to kill myself in that video. And I do believe I was going through some depression at the time. And things have gotten better since then. But whatever. I mean, I could chalk it up to the fact that just speaking in front of a camera is very unnatural. Other than that, this is pretty much how I talk to myself when I drive. When I'm driving down the road, like if you ever saw me in traffic and you see my lips moving and there's nobody else in the car, just realize that I'm just warming up for my next whatever this is. I still haven't figured it out. I don't feel comfortable calling it a podcast because it's not on Spotify or any of that stuff, and it's not entirely live because I do go back and edit things out because I do make stupid mistakes. And I figure if you have the time to do it and you have the editing software, and quite frankly, I like editing. It's fun. And I like to practice. And I wouldn't mind at one point maybe having a job doing video editing for somebody. Or, you know what would be better is if I had a job doing video editing for myself. It'd be nice to get paid for something, whatever it is. I mean, I've been playing guitar for 35 years, and I don't really get paid for that. How long have I been playing guitar? I've been playing guitar for about 35 years. And I've rarely gotten paid for that. It's like, when I get paid for playing guitar, it's like a Scooby snack. You know, it's just something I don't really expect. And then just every now and then someone will throw me a Scooby snack. And it's like, wow, thank you. Wasn't expecting that. But it is the one thing that I believe I do better than anything else. Everybody's got their thing. Like, what are you? When I cooked, people would always assume that was my passion. They're like, well, since you have a passion for cooking. I'm like, no, I don't have a passion for cooking. I fucking hate cooking. I like cooking at home for myself, but I don't like cleaning up, and I don't like all the prep that goes into it. Honestly, I'd rather not spend 2 hours a day making dinner. But when I do cook, it takes me a long time because I get everything out. And I'm not one of those people that tries to spare the dishes. I'm not trying to spare myself dishes for later. I just start grabbing shit. I grab pots and pans. I'll grab pans I'm not even going to use. Sometimes I'll use plates that I could have just washed one and reused it or something, but when I'm cooking, I'm just fuck it, man. It's about getting the job done. And when I worked, in the kitchen, a lot of times you were just under a heavy time constraint, and you didn't have time to piddle around with stuff. But anyway, so what are we going to talk about today? I have no idea. I don't know what I came here for. Usually I talk about books. The last one I did was pretty intense. Let's see. I don't want to go that intense this time because last time I had to make a ton of notes. And when I'm doing like a what I would call like a distillation or like a summary of like a history book that I'm reading, I feel like I have to be very precise, especially on that last one, because it's such a touchy subject, with some people, and it's sensitive material, you would say, and so it's something that you could easily get banned for, or if you say the wrong thing, you don't want to give out misinformation. Honestly, I like misinformation. I think it's great. I think that people should be able to say whatever they want, and this whole idea that you can't be wrong without getting sued for like $90 million or $900 million is ridiculous. Like, if I have the right to speak, then I have the right to be wrong. And if I find that I'm wrong, I can apologize for it. It doesn't mean you have the right to come back and sue me for $1 billion because, you don't like that I was wrong. I think that it's just, I think there's too many people today with an authoritarian bent. And I'm not sure exactly where it comes from. I think a lot of it is just from social pressure. They don't want to be the odd one out of the group. They see that all the cool people are doing it. And, well, let's say in our authoritarian past, not America per se, but in Western history, authoritarianism oftentimes comes up because somebody doesn't want to be the odd one out. And so they all fall into line. And that's a problem. I mean, people need to be willing to be a dissident if they're going to have a voice and if they're going to prevent tyranny. You have to be a dissident in order to prevent tyranny. And that's unfortunate, but it seems to be what's going on right now. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. One thing I wanted to talk about, which I haven't spoke about on any of these podcasts yet, is languages. One of, I have 2 associate's degrees from community college. Okay, I'm not going to pretend like I've got this like illustrious like education, or this I don't have like a lot of people are like, oh, I got this degree and I got that degree, and they try to pump themselves up with it. I went to community college and got 2 AAs. Okay, that's the extent of my formal education. I barely made it through high school. Okay, I'm a dummy. But one thing I've always done is I've always read books. And even from a lot of the people that I listen to, like the influencers that I turn to when I'm working. Okay, I'm gonna step back even further here. Okay, so one of the things I like about my job is that I get to listen to a lot of like recorded material. Like, I get on YouTube and I've got my headphones in, and I would recommend this for everybody. Like, if you can. Most people have a more important job than me. I don't have a very important job. So not only does my education suck, but my career sucks too. And I have a pretty sucky job. But we'll go into that a little bit later. I actually really enjoy my job. But one of the things I do enjoy about my job, and one of the reasons I keep it, is because my job enables me to plug into my headphones and go through this current phase of my education, which is the University of YouTube. So I have certain people that I like to listen to, and I get to listen to hours of content every day when I'm at work, or every night, I should say. And one of the things I was going to say is a lot of the people I listen to don't have degrees. And some of them have barely made it out of high school, and some of them have never read a book. And it's obvious. Sometimes people have, like, even sometimes very smart people can have really bad grammar. I've always been more on the side of like I'm like the grammar Nazi that everybody hates. Like if somebody uses like whom in the wrong sense, it really bothers me. People just think that who and whom are interchangeable, and when they fuck it up, like it bothers me, and I want to like tell them, hey, you're using that wrong. You don't use whom in the nominative case, but when you go talking to people like that, they look at you like you're insane, and then they go, you're a grammar Nazi. But I'm not a very highly educated person. But when you can't even speak your own language, it's a little off-putting to me. And I know there's a lot of things I do that are off-putting to a lot of people. I'm under no illusions that I'm one of those cool guys, okay? I know that I have very unpopular opinions. I look unpopular. I am unpopular. And I'm totally okay with that. Because, to be honest, like, if I was popular, I'm not saying that I'd be unhappy. In fact, sometimes I wish I was more popular, and I envy people who are popular. Like, I'm an old man saying this, okay? But when I was in 7th grade, I was not one of the popular kids. I never was. You pick a grade. When I was in 40th grade, I wasn't popular. Okay, so I consider it a blessing in disguise. And one of the reasons is a lot of the popular people I know, they have a lot of people blowing smoke up their ass all the time. Like, I see people on social media saying some really, really dumb stuff. And people will, like, cheer them on. Like, they have, like, this whole cheerleading squad. I don't know how that comes about. Like, if they just unfriend everybody who doesn't agree with them. Or if some people just naturally draw simple-minded, idiotic people. But whenever I see someone who surrounds themselves with this sort of like kind of like posse of morons, it always makes me chuckle a little bit. And I kind of wanted to go into this. My old drummer, he used to do this. He used to have this posse of morons that would follow him around. And I'm like, dude, how do you like have the patience to hang out with all these stupid people? Like, don't you want them to go home? I know I would. And they all just follow him around, sucking his ass, and he just eats it up, man. He just loves it. But that's beside the point. Oh, another example of people that like to live in these echo chambers is, well, this is to the extreme degree. Have you ever had like a friend that like talks about wanting to kill themselves on social media, and they start like giving voice to these like suicidal tendencies? Not the band, okay, but like they'll be like, oh yeah, I kind of want to kill myself, and I hope my kids are gonna be. I hope somebody takes care of my kids, because I'm gonna off myself next week, and all their friends are like, no, don't. You have too much to live for. And they get all this, they get lavished with all this like attention. And I'm not saying that like everybody who is suicidal is seeking attention, but one thing I'll say is that there are 13-year-olds out there who commit suicide, and they're able to do it. So I would think that anybody who's over the age of 30 that really wants to die would succeed if they wanted to. Because I think that suicide is one of those things that when you make the decision and you're ready to do it, you just fucking do it, man. You don't tell everybody about it. You don't try to appeal to everybody's sympathy and try to get the blowjob or whatever the hell some of these guys are doing on social media when they start screaming about how they're ready to off themselves. And I'm not trying to make light of this at all. I have a really good friend who I went to high school with who would do this, and he would talk about, oh, well, I'm going to leave my kids behind, and, like, I hope they forgive me for what I'm about to do. And then he would never do it, but then he'd pop up again, like, 4 months later and do the same shit. And so one time I sent him a private message, and I was like, bro, like, if you're hurting, man, I'm here for you, dude. Like, if you want to talk, dude, you got a friend right here, dude. I've known you for a long time. let's talk. And he's like, oh no, dude, it's cool. That's just like this thing that I do. And I was like, what? And I realized that that's this guy's fucking racket, man. Is that he goes on social media and starts pouring out all this shit, and he's like he's capitalizing on it somehow. I don't know how that would make someone feel like they're winning in the end if they were doing that premeditatedly in order to like get something out of it. I know some people are just depressed. Some people are even, weak, for want of a better word. A weakness is part of what drives people to that. And but sometimes it's just complete and total bullshit. And Frank Zappa has a song about this. I talk about Frank Zappa a lot because I love Frank Zappa. But he has a song called Suicide Chump. Suicide Chump. Not jump, but like a chump, like you're being a chump. And it's, I don't want to quote the lyrics, but go look it up. Suicide Chump. And it totally exemplifies, like the lyrics are spot on when it comes to describing these particular people. I was trying to avoid that. I'm going to check my phone real quick because I'm live, man. What's going on here? It's my son's mom, and we're trying to arrange to have him come back home. And so, yeah, the logistics of juggling the child, it happens. Okay. Yeah, my boy. He's going to be coming back soon. I love my kid, man. My kid is everything. I love that kid. And his sister, too. She's great. I took care of her for a while, too, but she's currently not with me. She's back at her grandma's house with her mom. So, good stuff. But anyway, I really didn't mean to go into that suicide thing. It's just, it's something that I think about sometimes. Okay, so one of the things I really wanted to talk about is, okay, I remember how I got down this rabbit hole. I was talking about school. One of my two minor degrees that I have, my meager, minor, diminutive degrees that I have is, okay, I got two degrees, one in psychology and one in foreign languages. Unfortunately, the psychology degree is completely worthless. I mean, I could probably get a job and say, oh, I got a degree. But, I mean, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be anybody's shrink, okay? So, I think I just wanted to be like Hannibal Lecter or something. And I'm actually going to cut this recording real quick, and then I'll restart it. Because I don't want to do, when I'm working with these recordings, I don't want to have to deal with an hour-long recording if I'm going to edit any of it. So I'm going to cut the recording, and I'm going to pick up. And we're back. Okay, so I went to community college and got 2 associate degrees. One of them in psychology, which is completely worthless, as I was saying, because the field of psychology is rife with bullshit. I studied psychology for 10 years at least before I even started college. I started out reading Carl Jung when I was about 21 or 22. I had the basic writings of Carl Jung. And it was really weird. I mean, I didn't know what to make. I was reading about the collective unconscious, and it was really hard for me to really understand what he was talking about. And it took me reading, I had to read several thousand pages of Jung before I started to get even a beginner's grasp on what he means when he says the collective unconscious. I had no idea what he meant. And and the archetypes. I didn't know I was like, what's an arc? Like, I didn't even know how to pronounce it. I was like, what is this archetypes thing? You know, like, I had no clue. And when you jump into Jung with no previous training, I mean, it's pretty daunting. You know, you're in some pretty deep waters when you read Jung, and depending on where you start, obviously too. And I just recently downloaded a PDF of the complete works of Carl Jung, the edited complete works series. If you're familiar with Jung, you know that all of his writings are compiled in a sort of library called the Complete Works, and there's several volumes. I don't know how many volumes, like 20 volumes or something, 22 volumes. And I have most of them now in book form. I used to search far and wide, and I ordered a lot of, back before the internet, before we had internet. There was internet. I wasn't one of the first ones on there. And so I was still going to bookstores, and when I lived up in Portland, we had some really nice bookstores up there. And I would buy these books when I could, and I would study Jung. And the one that I really like, if I was to recommend for anybody to read Jung, I would recommend that they read the Viking Portable. You know how they have those Viking Portable series? Like, you can get the Voltaire, the Mark Twain, whatever. They've got pretty much a Viking Portable series for every influential writer with a large body of work. And the C.G. Jung, the Viking Portable C.G. Jung, is a very good anthology. So I would recommend that for a beginner. Anybody who doesn't know anything about Jung, who is curious to know about what his theories were. That's a good one. So I was really wanting to talk more about languages, because my other degree was in foreign language studies. And so I really wanted to talk about foreign languages. So maybe I'll get back to psychology a little bit later. So with foreign language is a field where I've always wanted to excel. I've always wanted to be very good at it. When I was a kid, I lived overseas because my dad was in the Air Force. He was enlisted in the Air Force. I was born in Warsaw, Indiana, 1975, and probably a month and a half later we moved, so I wasn't there very long. We were there because my dad was going to a missionary college, and he decided he had gotten out of the Air Force for a little while, and so while he was out of the Air Force attending missionary college, he decided at some point that it wasn't his calling. That he felt like, I don't know if he felt like God was leading him in another direction or what, but he went back in the Air Force. And as soon as he went back, we visited some family, I think in Michigan, because both my parents are from Michigan. And then he went back in the Air Force, and we lived, I think we were in Denver, Colorado, maybe for a short period of time. And then we were in Las Vegas. My dad did some kind of interesting stuff in Las Vegas. I don't really want to go into that because I don't know much about it. And I think probably a lot of it was very top secret. But he was like at Area 52. You know, they have Area 51. He was like next door at Area 52. Not really, but something like that. So after Las Vegas, we moved to Germany. I think that's the order. Either it was Vegas first and Denver second, or it was, I don't remember. I was like one. But we moved to Germany in 1977, I think. And so all I remember growing up is living in Europe, living overseas, living in a foreign country. And just us being the foreigners. And the fact that it was not to be taken for granted that the people around you spoke the same language as you. So when I was in Germany, I was exposed to a lot of German language, naturally. Okay. My dad used to take us on vacations a lot, and he would take us to like Rothenburg, Neuschwanstein. Um, he took us to Holland. He took us to Spain. Um, he would take us to all these different places. Munich was another place that we went. Um, and this was the first time we lived in Germany. We were in Wiesbaden, and so we lived on the military base there. So it was a nice big military base, and the apartment buildings were like these kind of giant like cracker boxes, like these. They look like a giant RV, you know. Like there was 3 stairwells per building, and usually 3 to 4 floors per building. And there's like an attic space, and my brother actually, when my dad was stairwell coordinator, he actually set up a little bedroom upstairs for my brother, which was really cool for him. He had this nice like sloping like wall, that wall ceiling kind of thing, and with a window, and he was like way up there, you know, on the roof. Basically, you could look down on the roof, and so that was pretty cool. But those buildings, I mean, the military buildings, I mean, they were so nondescript. Everything on base was nondescript, and everything was painted in that weird kind of 70s green, that sort of like canned green beans colored green that you get. It's probably like the cheapest paint, and the government orders a shit ton of it and paints everything in that green color. And so you got all these apartment buildings, and so we, you know, that was what I grew up with. It was living on base with the guard at the gate, you know, holding an M16, and you know, to protect the military dependent families that lived on base. And that was how I grew up. I mean, the way that those bases were laid out was sort of the architecture of my childhood, and it actually, in a lot of my artwork, I portray that. Like I've painted those scenes from outside. You know, when you're a kid, you can play outside. You don't see a lot of kids playing outside today because people have realized how dangerous it can be. And they're doing other things. But when you live on base, you can safely play outside for the most part. You got a guard at the gate with an M16. What are they going to do? Right? They're going to lob some like bombs, you know, over the fence? I mean, probably not. Usually, I mean, the relationship between the Germans and the Americans during the Cold War, when I was living over there in West Germany, the relationship was amicable. I mean, we helped their economy to some degree, so I think that they didn't hate us. It wasn't like we were despised so much. If they despised us, they kind of did it quietly. They didn't really do it to our face. But I mean, what do I know? I was 6. But so what I'm really getting at here in so many words is that living in Germany, I was exposed to the German language quite a bit. You know, everything had German names. All the streets had German names. Kind of like when you live in California and all the cities and all the streets and all the counties and everything have Spanish names. And you kind of like sort of learn a little bit of Spanish just by dint of the fact that you happen to be in this geographical location where everything is named something Spanish. That's how it is in California, where I live. And when you are in Germany, everything has German names. Okay, they don't have Spanish names for the streets in Germany. I mean, they might have a few, but it's very, very rare. I would assume. But so I grew up with the German language. That was my foundation. Was hearing mostly English and some German. And when I was in kindergarten, we had a German teacher. Her name was Frau Mietz, and she would show up and she would teach us poems in German, you know, nursery rhymes in German. And we would have to say like Auf Wiedersehen, Frau Mietz, you know, when she would leave, and we'd have to say Guten Morgen when she showed up. And I know my German pronunciation is terrible, but I don't. What I was gonna get to, part of the reason why my German sucks, because there's no excuse. I should know German like the back of my hand. My brother is fluent in German, but the truth is, I was pretty young when I lived there, and I'm not trying to make excuses for myself. This 6-year-old should have had much more discipline and should have taken it on himself to learn that freaking language. Okay, no, fuck that. All my friends were Americans. Okay, I didn't have a lot of friends, but the ones I had spoke English, and those are the ones I felt comfortable with. So I didn't learn German. The only people who learned German were some of the adults, some smart people, and teenagers. Teenagers often learn German because they could go off base and drink. Okay, but you could drink in Germany when you're like 16. You can go to a bar and get wasted at 16. I don't know if it's that way anymore, but at the time, you could go to a bar and drink when you're 16. I have drank in German bars since I was 12 years old. Okay, I'm not proud of it. I'm not saying it was good for me. I wouldn't recommend it. I would never send my kid into one of these places. But I got drunk in bars when I was 12. And that is something that most Americans don't experience. But I experienced it in Germany, and I experienced it in Italy, which is the next step. After 5 years at Wiesbaden, we moved. I was 7 years old, 1982. We moved to Italy. And we moved to a city in, I think is it northeast Italy? Called Verona. It's a beautiful city. It's full of Roman architecture. There's actually a Colosseum there. It's called l'Arena, the arena. Very, very original. It's smaller than the Colosseum, but it's functional. Like the Roman Colosseum, as I'd seen, I know that they do hold events there from time to time. Like they've got like a kit, they can kind of set up bleachers and turn the Roman Colosseum into a place where they can. I know that there's been concerts there, but the Verona Arena, they hold operas there every summer, and it's a worldwide attraction. They have like Aida, they have Romeo and Juliet, they have certain ones, they rotate them out, and it attracts people from all over the world, and so it's outfitted to accommodate events all the time. They had concerts there. There was this thing they used to do called Festival Bar, and they would have like new wave bands come and play. Like Frankie Goes to Hollywood would play there. So I lived in Italy from 1982 until 1985, and I did learn a little bit of Italian when I was there, because I didn't live on base there. We didn't have the cracker boxes there. There was bases there. The closest, I think it was an Army air base called Vicenza, and we would go. We just call it Vicenza. That's how we said it. We were American. We went to Vicenza, dude. We would do our grocery shopping there because we didn't have like a real grocery store where we were. We had like a 7-Eleven basically. It was like I don't remember what they called it. They might have called it a commissary, but it was about the size of a 7-Eleven. But if we wanted to do any real grocery shopping and get like AFES products, AFES was American Armed Forces Exchange Services. It was, I don't know if it was a contractor or what exactly AFES was, but that's who supplied most of, like our milk said AFES on it. Everything was AFES, kind of like when you go to Winco and you get Winco brand products. They had AFES for the Armed Forces Exchange Service, and that was your BX. That was your commissary. Pretty much any commerce that happened on base went through AFES, and so we would go to Vicenza, and they had a base there with the big cracker box apartment buildings. Where am I at on time here? 15 something. Okay. So we didn't live on base. We lived on in a farming community in a little town in the outskirts of Verona called Casale, and Casale. We call it Casale, and it was way on the outskirts of Verona, and there was some farming communities further out. I remember there was one further out called Sommo Campagna, and I had some friends that lived there, and I mean they were way out in the boondocks, and but I was sort of like in between. I was close to a little small town called Luganiano, and it was like one intersection basically. And there was a guy, this kind of crazy guy, who used to stand on the street corner, and he was mentally handicapped, and I remember he would stand by this traffic light, and he would put on a spectacle for traffic. He would like act all goofy, and I remember one time we were driving through, and he had his arms wrapped around the light pole for the traffic light, and was making out with the traffic, like with the pole. And we used to call him the Luganiano Looney. And I don't know whatever happened to the Luganiano Looney, but I would imagine if he's not dead yet, he's probably pretty old. I was 7 at the time. And so we lived in Casale, and some of the farmers had kids. I remember there was a trucker that lived downstairs from us. He had this beautiful daughter. I remember she was just amazing looking Italian girl. And she had like this whole entourage of dudes on mopeds that would show up and just crowd around out. Like, and she'd come out on her balcony like the queen. And all these guys would be whistling at her, and just like, back in those days, it was, people catcalled a lot more than they do today. And I don't know how the dad didn't go out there with some kind of like grenade launcher and like just destroy these guys, but he had a really beautiful daughter, and every dude in town knew it, and we knew it. I mean, I was 8 years old and I knew it. I mean, she was beautiful. She had this perfectly square, like square head. Her head was a perfect square. It was like that square jawline with like a dimple in her chin, and blonde hair, and just a beautiful Italian chick, And of course, my brother was like her age, but I mean, there was no way he was getting in there. Not with all these. He didn't have a moped for one, but that's the thing. Like, Italian teenagers always had mopeds. That was like, I mean, you get your moped, and then you kind of have a little bit of social status. You can ride with the group. They got these moped gangs. And they're riding around with their flip flops and their mopeds. It's pretty funny. So that trucker that lived downstairs with that beautiful daughter, I had a name for him. I called him Gum Chewer Boot Wearer, because he always wore boots and he always chewed gum. So when I was 8 years old, in my 8-year-old mind, I dubbed him Gum Chewer Boot Wearer. And I had my whole family in on it. We all said it. We're all, yeah, well, if Gum Chewer Boot Wearer comes around, he's going to tell us this and that, But he always wore boots, and he always chewed gum. And he drove a big-ass semi-truck. And we lived on like a 1-lane gravel road that was like a half-mile long. And Gum Chewer Boot Wearer would be driving his semi-truck down this little road. And one time he almost like ran me over. I was riding my bike. I had this cheap Avies bicycle, and it had like a sign on the front that said 330 Team Murray. I'm like, who's Murray? But like, I was on Team Murray, I guess. So I was riding my Team Murray down the gravel road, and Gum Chewer Boot Wearer comes riding up on my ass with his fucking semi truck. I was like 8 years old, and I was so scared. Like, he had his lights bearing down on me. He didn't hit his horn. It'd been kind of cool if he did. But, I mean, he was like 10 feet behind me, and I bailed on my little Team Murray bicycle, and I thought I was going to die. I didn't know if he could see me or not. But he stopped, and he came out and he helped me up, which was real nice. So I had Gum Chewer Boot Wearer downstairs, and then across the way we had our landlord, whose name was Cacciatore. And Cacciatore is kind of a funny name. You think chicken cacciatore. Cacciatore is actually the Italian word for hunter. And so Cacciatore, one time I had a balcony, like my bedroom had a balcony. This is how cool Italian apartments were. So not only did we have a bidet, like everybody had a bidet. Like, no matter how shitty your apartment was, you had a bidet. And it's like, it seems like only rich people have bidets in America. Like, we haven't really caught it. Like, we used to think that we were so like hygienically superior to the Italians because they kind of smelled bad and like the women didn't shave their armpits and stuff. But like they had fucking bidets, man. Like we're walking around with toilet paper stuck to our ass, and these motherfuckers are rinsing their balls off in the bidet, and we have no clue how to use it. We're like putting plants in there and shit. Like the Americans didn't know what to. We couldn't make heads or tails of that fucking debate. It's like bidet. We were like, do we fucking drink out of it? Like, what is this thing for? We didn't realize it was like a fucking bird bath for your asshole. So like, I think I was on the subject of cacciatore. So I went out on my balcony one morning. It was some frosty, like January morning in Casale, and I saw cacciatore on his fucking roof. And he's got this big hunting knife in his hand. And he calls over to me and he's speaking Italian. And he says, "Hey, you want a rabbit?" And I was like, "Yeah, fuck yeah, I want a rabbit." I was like 8 years old. You think I don't want a rabbit? And the motherfucker jumps off his roof with his hunting knife and grabs a rabbit by the ears and cuts its fucking throat right in front of me. He's like, "Come down here." I'm like, "No, I'm not coming down there." Oh shit. When I finally got the nerve, this guy was goading me downstairs. By the time I got downstairs, he had this fucking thing wrapped up. He handed it to me. He goes, "Here, give it to your mom and have her cook it for dinner." I thought I was getting a pet rabbit. Oh, it was traumatizing. Fucking traumatizing, man. So that was Cacciatore. That was our landlord. And, yeah, man, I don't even know where to go from there. So, you know, I'd play with some of the Italian kids in the neighborhood, and I remember I'd fight with them sometimes. Like, I used to fight a lot when I was a kid. I don't know why. I was always fighting. My kid never fights. He's never been in a fight, never. I remember I got punched in the nose the first day of kindergarten. I was not one of the bigger kids. I was pretty small. So I guess I was asking for it. But I remember I got punched in the nose the first day of kindergarten. I remember the first day I was in Italy, I fought two kids in my class at recess. We were like throwing sand in each other's mouth and shit. We were fucking each other up. I got like I had a fat lip. These guys were messing me up. And one of the kids, I fought him consistently. I don't want to say his name. I'm actually friends with his mom on Facebook. But he and I used to fight all the fucking time. And we would take turns whooping each other's ass. Usually he kind of got the best of me, but every now and then I'd get like a lucky, like, I remember one time I smacked his fucking glasses off and they went flying across the schoolyard. And the other kid who was the second party of this fight, I beat the fuck out of that kid every chance I got. Like, anytime like the adults weren't looking, I'd just fucking clock him right in his fucking jaw, man. The other kid gave me a run for my money, and I would fight. And I never really wanted to fight this dude, but he was a little bit tough, you know, for an 8-year-old. But like, I remember fighting that dude at least 4, 5, 6 times. But the other kid, I used to beat the shit out of that dude. And I remember one time, I would gain his confidence. I'd be like, "No, we're cool, dude. We can be friends now." And then as soon as no one's looking, I would just take my jacket and just whip the fuck out of him with this jacket. I remember the zipper on my jacket like cut his eye one time. I remember another time I fought this kid on the playground, and my brother made fun of me for years after this because I was chasing him around the schoolyard and my shoes came off because we had these like bobos that we would wear. You know, these were Afy's shoes. They looked like Converse All-Stars, except they didn't have a star. They had like 3 stripes on the side, but they had that rubber toe that you get on Converse All-Stars, and these cheap-ass shoes would fall apart. And so they were always coming untied. You know, like some shoes just don't stay tied. And remember chasing this kid around the schoolyard after it had rained, and there was mud everywhere, and we were slipping and sliding in the mud, and my fucking sock was hanging off. Like, not only did my shoes come off, my socks were coming off. And so, like, I had my sock. You know, we had these big tube socks because this is like 1983, right? And everybody like wore tube socks, different colored stripes on them and stuff. And if you were lucky, you had a pair that matched. And so I had this. My socks were hanging off, and they looked like these like bunny ears that were hanging off my feet. You know, they were flopping around while I was chasing this kid around the schoolyard, beating the shit out of him. But man, yeah, I used to fight a lot when I was a kid, and I remember I fought with the Italian kids that lived on one of the farms, and I remember this little kid. He was smaller than me, and I think I started it with him for some reason. I don't know what happened, but I ended up fighting with this kid after like 5 minutes of knowing him, and he was on top of me. Like remember in Christmas Story when he was on top of that dude and he was just beating the shit out of him? That's what this kid was doing to me. And I learned Italian pretty quick. And I made some friends, and we would ride around Casale on our bicycles. I wasn't old enough for a moped yet. But I did have a mini cycle. Like one of the neighbors, this guy, Larry Peterson was his name. He gave us a mini cycle, but my dad never repaired it, so it never worked. I would just kind of push it around, and it was like super heavy. And we could never get it to start. So we had this useless mini bike, you know, out in the it was in our cantina. We call it a cantina. Okay, you know how like sometimes you'll have a basement area that's used for storage? Well, we called it, in Italy, it's called a cantina. And so cantina just means like a basement, I guess. Like a kind of a subterranean storage spot, you know. Cantina is also like a bistro that they could have, and they sometimes have it like on a lower level, like that's not underground, but you kind of have to, like if you're on ground level, you have to walk down some stairs to get to it, you know. Even in Star Wars, the cantina in Star Wars is sort of, you could see when they walk in, they're walking from above, and they come down into this kind of underground like little bar. So that's what a cantina is, and but a cantina is also, it's like an underground storage unit that sometimes they have in apartments. And so we had this cantina with a busted ass mini bike down there, and so that was my moped. But I never got it to run. But I would ride my bicycles around with some of these kids, and the girls took to me because I was a pretty cute kid. I had this nice bowl haircut, and I had those multicolored tube socks and running shorts, you know. It's like those running shorts, I don't know why they cut those things so high. It's like if you're lucky your balls weren't hanging out of that thing. Even at the age I was, like I had to tame my balls to keep them from falling out of the side of these like yellow running shorts that I had. Maybe that's why the girls liked me. I think it was because of our last name, Amore, you know, like what Italian girl isn't gonna like that? Okay, so we were the Amores. We had to learn how to say our name. Actually, when we moved to Italy, we were still calling ourselves Amore. I was Chris Amore. Hi, I'm Chris Amore. But we learned very quickly that we were pronouncing our name wrong, and so I had to learn how to say it. And I remember the girls, they knew my last name, and so they were asking me, what's your last name? They're saying it in Italian. And this is how I'm learning Italian. I'm learning Italian because I've got these girls hitting on me when I'm like 8. Okay, and they're like, what's your last name? And so I tell them, Amore. And they're just giggling, and, oh my God, he's so cute. And so they followed me around everywhere. These girls, they loved that our name was Amore. It was very, very special. I've been blessed with that last name throughout my life. I will say, it is one thing that has been, that name has gotten me laid like more than most people's names get them laid. It does happen. You can have a name that gets you laid, believe me. but I never liked my first name. I never went by my first name. I go by my middle name. So my first name was never very special. Jonathan. Hi, Jonathan. Oh, Jonathan is so nice. Like, nobody named Jonathan ever got laid for being Jonathan, except maybe Jonathan Davis. He probably got laid for being Jonathan Davis. But oh my God, that's Jonathan Davis. So I learned some Italian just from scooting around on my bike, trying not to get run over by big semi trucks. Yeah, I was very exposed to the Italian language, but I didn't go to Zelo. The American kids, if you showed up in Italy during your preschool age, if you showed up when you were 3, I showed up when I was 7. So I didn't really learn Italian in school very much. They did, we had our Italian class. Like twice a week, we would have Signora Langobardi. She would come in and teach us. And we took lessons from her. And she would teach us the colors and the numbers and all this stuff. But it wasn't like we didn't learn conversational Italian. But, who did learn conversational Italian? It's the fucking 3-year-olds, okay? So if you moved to Verona at 3, they put you in what was called Zelo. And it was a completely immersive, all Italian preschool where you couldn't speak English. So you had to learn Italian. There was Italian kids there and there was American kids there. And all the instruction happened in Italian. I'm guessing. I didn't go. I don't know. But I had friends. I'm like, well, why? How do you speak Italian? So, I went to Zelo. So I always envied these privileged kids that went to Zelo. I didn't get to go to Zelo. I wish I had gone to fucking Zelo. But I didn't. I didn't go to Zelo. But years later, I took Italian at American River College in Sacramento. And, kind of made up for lost time. 30 years later. I took 2 semesters of Italian at community college. And I actually, for a third semester, I audited the class, which is when you don't enroll in the class, but the teacher is nice enough to let you sit in. And I did that with Italian, and I did that with German, and I also did it with, just Italian and German. I took the Russian classes. So I was just, in a roundabout way, I was kind of getting around to my foreign language studies. I really wanted to talk about that this time. And because I love foreign languages. I have a huge library of foreign language books. When I was maybe 23, I decided that I was going to try and learn all these languages. And one of the things I'm trying to get at is I suck at it. I suck at it. I think I tried to say this earlier. I went into it with the intention that I was going to be this like polyglot wizard. And I'm not. I've taken formal training in German, Italian, Spanish, Russian, and I taught myself how to speak Dutch. And I did take some formal training in Dutch. I had a Dutch tutor when I lived in Portland. And I suck at every language that I've tried to learn how to speak. And mainly it's because I don't really speak it. I don't get into these situations where I have to use it. The one language that I speak better than any other language besides English is Spanish. And that's the one I care least about. I never cared about Spanish. But I speak it all the time because in most of the jobs that I've worked, my coworkers are all native Spanish speakers, most of whom don't speak English at all. My current supervisor speaks no English at all. If I want to communicate with my supervisor, I have to do it in Spanish. I'm not complaining. This is a blessing. I am so thankful that I get to practice one of the languages that I've studied. And I wanted to get in. I'm getting really uncomfortable. I'm going to move around. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to kind of kick my feet up and stretch out my back a little bit. I'm getting really far into this program. I'm going to cut the recording here, and I'm going to restart it. Okay. So, what am I going to talk about? Spanish. When I moved to California in 1989, finally moved back to the States. I couldn't wait to get back to the States. When I was 13, I dreamed of being back in the States. I couldn't wait to get back here. Like, I would look up at the dismal, gray, overcast sky where the sun never shone through. 365 days a year when I lived in Prüm. I'm going to have to back this story up even more. Because I was talking about Italy. In 1985, we moved from Italy. We stopped, we did go to Michigan in the United States. Yeah, that Michigan. We went to Michigan to visit our relatives. While we were there, my parents split up. And they decided to get a divorce. My mom decided to go back to Italy. And my brother decided that he was going to go with my dad. So that meant that I was going to go with my dad. Because I needed to be around my brother. You know, I loved my brother very much. And so I didn't want to be separated from my brother. He was like my hero. You know, and so we went, unfortunately, back to Germany. I did not want to go back to Germany. When we were done in Italy, like, I think we were all ready to go back to the States. I think even my mom. I don't know what was up with my mom, whether she, maybe my mom didn't want to go to Germany. Maybe that had something to do with things. But I know me and my brother sure as fuck didn't want to go back to Germany. And when we went back to Germany, we went back to Germany. Like, it was like a tiny little... Okay, I talked about... Damn it. I talked about the apartment buildings, the cracker boxes. We moved onto one of those cracker box housing areas with no guard at the gate. 4 apartment buildings only. Those were the only Americans for like 50 miles. I had like maybe 14 kids my age in this housing area. Hold on. News about my son. I have to find out when he's coming home. Okay, yeah, my kid's coming home. So I'm going to have to make this kind of quick. So we moved onto this dismal little pissant little housing area. And when I saw it, my heart sank. Like, when I saw the school I was going to have to go to at the top of this hill, my heart just sank. When I saw the stairs I was going to have to climb to get up the hill to go to the school, it was a fucking staircase with 1,000 stairs on it. Okay, and we had to line up on that staircase with like the kindergartners at the very top and the 6th graders down below, and there was maybe 100 kids at that school total, kindergarten through 6th grade. Maybe 100 kids. I would say closer to like maybe 80 kids. And our class, like I remember 5th and 6th grade were in the same classroom. Okay. We had just moved from Italy, which was like a virtual paradise. Like everybody loved Italy. To this day, every single person I know who lived in Verona considers that to be the best time of their life. These are okay in the year 2022. If I was to get on Facebook and open a DM chat with any of the people that I knew from Italy, they would tell me that 1982 through 1985 was the best time of their life. Hands down, all of them. Okay, we all loved Italy. We had the lake. You could go to the lake. Like I said, if you were 12, you could drink in a bar. Nobody cared. It was the birth of the VHS movement, so we all watched movies at home for the first time in our lives. We would go to the lake. When you're at the lake, all the girls are topless, and they have hairy armpits, but they're topless, and so you've got boobs everywhere. So when you're 9 years old, you could look around at all the boobs, okay? And so what's not to like, okay? And you got Roman architecture everywhere. You've got the night sky is like this cerulean, like majestic, like cosmos. It's unbelievably beautiful there. And it was just a really good time. I mean, it was during the time when like Michael Jackson was hitting with Thriller, and you had what else? E.T. came out, and Return of the Jedi came out, and all your favorite, the Gremlins came out. Like for movies, it was a great time for movies. So for pop culture, all the girls were listening to Wham. Duran Duran was popular. Okay, because we were in Europe, so you had this this European kind of new wave thing going. Everybody had cool hair. The Benetton stores were everywhere. Everybody wore Benetton. Everybody's decked out in Benetton, listening to Duran Duran and Wham and Cyndi Lauper and shit. Okay, so that time in Italy was a very special time for all of us. Fast forward to 1985. I go to Michigan to visit some family. I discover MTV. I discover cable. Take that cable away, I'm going to Germany. No more cable. One TV channel, AFN, Armed Forces Network. No commercials, but many public service announcements. Think OPSEC. Don't spy on your country. Don't drink and drive. Don't beat your wife. Eat your fruits and vegetables. Those were our commercials. The sky was fucking gray for 4 years straight. Nothing but clouds. No differentiate. It's not like you could see duckies and bunnies in the clouds. It wasn't like that. You looked at the clouds, you saw a gray fucking mat. Okay? We were in a dome, like a gray dome. The sun never came out once in 4 years. Like 5,000 days in Prüm. This place was called Prüm with a Prüm. It was P-R-U with an umlaut M. Prüm. We lived in Prüm. Okay? You don't understand. The closest big base with multiple cracker boxes was Bitburg. And that's where I went to middle school. We had to take the bus to Bitburg. And we had a bus driver, a German bus driver, who looked like Big Bird. Big Bird drove us to Bitburg. Okay? If you know, you know. Okay? Bus drivers were assholes. We would have fights. We would get into fights with our bus drivers. Us kids, middle school kids. We would get into brawls with our bus driver. Okay, it happened in Italy too. The Italian buses, we would get into fights with the bus driver. I think one of our bus drivers slapped my brother. It happened. My brother got slapped by a bus driver. They would play our tapes though sometimes. I remember giving my Van Halen 1984 tape to my bus driver and him playing it, and all the girls sitting around going, "Ew, ew, it sucks. I want to hear Celebration. I want to hear Rockwell." You know, like nobody wanted to hear my tape because I listened to heavy metal. I was a cool kid. They just didn't know it yet. I was 8 years old listening to Kiss, Van Halen, Billy Idol, Prince. I mean, that was my shit. Okay. And Duran Duran with my Benetton. You know, we did it. But I'm going to just stress this again. I moved to Prüm, the gray sky, for 4 years. 4 apartment buildings, little school up on top of the hill, 1,000 stairs, 5,000 days. All right. This is where I learned how to play guitar. I was so fucking bored every day. All I did was play guitar. I learned how to play guitar because my brother played guitar. My brother had a guitar. And he introduced me to heavy metal. Okay. That's why I am the rock and roll heavy metal freak that I am. Because my brother listened to Dio. Most important, Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden. Okay. Iron Maiden changed my life. When I saw the VA, we didn't have Blockbuster, okay? You know, I told you about AFIS. Okay, so on base, there was a video rental center. And they had Iron Maiden video pieces on VHS. 4 songs: Run of the Hills, The Trooper, Flight of Icarus, Number of the Beast. Not necessarily in that order. I watched that fucking video 7 times a day, okay? When Live After Death came out, I watched it every single day. All right. So Iron Maiden figures very highly in my value system. All right. So yeah, those were the days. Yeah, a lot of time cooped up in that little apartment, watching Iron Maiden, listening to Iron Maiden. I got all the Iron Maiden. I had tapes. I talked my dad into buying me a dual cassette deck when I was in maybe 6th grade, so you could dub tapes. And then when I was in 7th grade, I finally got the stereo with the CD player. The very first CD I bought was Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force. I love that album. The very first one. Some of his stuff is cheesy. He got into that kind of Japanese kind of style, like heavy metal with these operatic vocalists and stuff. I don't like those albums. What was the one? Trilogy. I didn't like that singer. Okay, but that first album, it only had vocals on like 1 or 2 songs. But man, guitar playing was just great. And back then, like a CD was like $30. Like, you go to like the Audio Photo Club. That was where we got our music. That was the record store on base. Was the Audio Photo Club. And you could like rent pornos there. I mean, I never did, but you know, they rented pornos. And they had videos and they had CDs, and when CDs first came out, they were like $30, man. And you adjust that for inflation, man. Like that's like $60 for a CD today. So I saved up my money and I bought Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force. That was my first CD, and my second CD was The Number of the Beast. And you know, just grew and grew from there. And one thing that was tolerable about Prüm, one thing that made Prüm tolerable, is that if you were lucky enough to have a parent that would drive you about 100 miles away, you could go to Cologne, the city. Cologne. We call it Cologne, but they call it Köln. Is that they had this record store that was like 2 city blocks and like 3 stories high, called Saturn, and they had everything. You could get everything from Saturn. And so that was a really special trip when like Dad would take us to Saturn. And I bought a lot of records, a lot of Kiss records, because I got into Kiss. My friend Charlie Osborne, I'm going to give him a shout out because I love Charlie Osborne. He's my buddy. We're still friends. He gave me my first Kiss records, and Rock and Roll Over and Love Gun. And I played the fuck out of those records, man. I love those albums. Whenever I see these like zillennial fucking idiots on Facebook talking shit about Kiss, I'm always like, man, you do not even know whose shoulders you stand on. There's one thing I gotta say, like, I'm gonna totally boomer out here for a second and be a boomer. This is my boomer moment. This fucking generation, okay? The millennials too. The millennials and the Gen Zs know nothing about rock and roll. I will say that. Like, okay, they're good at getting... There's some great musicians, don't get me wrong. There's some millennial musicians who are fantastic. And they're great on the guitar. I mean, like, they've got the tools. They've got the technology to help them along. I had the fucking rewind button on my cassette deck to learn songs. Okay? All I could do was listen to the same song over and over again. And if I was lucky, my tape machine didn't eat my tape and spit out my cassette in a big heaping pile of fucking tape. Okay? So, like, we didn't get to loop stuff and slow stuff down. We didn't have tabs available online. We didn't have, like, the actual artist teaching us on YouTube, like, how to play their songs. If we wanted to learn a Megadeth song, we had to rewind that fucking song 50 million times on a shitty ass fucking tape that, like, was a bad copy to begin with. If you were going to learn songs in those days, you had to be fucking good, man. You couldn't... There was very little tablature available. They did have Guitar Magazine. I'm stretching out here. You know, Guitar for the Practicing Musician, magazines like that were really good. I learned, you know, it's kind of funny when I got my first guitar magazine and I figured out the tab because I couldn't read notation. So I learned, I taught myself how to read the tab, you know, and I thought that was, it's kind of like thinking that you know how to tell time because you can read a digital clock, you know, like first time I like figured out that 3:27 on a digital clock meant that it was 3:27. I'm like, I could tell time now. And well, it's kind of like that when you look at tab for the first time and you're like, I can read music because I've got this tablature. So I remember the first guitar magazine I bought had Battery, Metallica's Battery. That's a hard fucking song to play. But I learned about tab from that. I think it was that the guitar magazine? I think it had Kirk Hammett and Joe Satriani maybe on the cover. But I remember Battery was one of the featured songs in there. And so I started buying guitar magazines. And that was huge on my guitar playing. I love sheet music. I collect sheet music. I've got books and books and books. When I went to church, at the end of at the end of the sermon or the end of the worship service, when they would, when finally the band would pack up and leave, they would leave their sheet music and I would take it. And I love traditional music. I love like Americana. I love patriotic music. Like, I'm such a sucker for like the vision of what America was like in the early days. Like when I read history and I think about like I love the colonial period. And when a lot of people are really ashamed of American history and I'm really not. I mean, like, there were some bad things that happened for sure, but like the whole, a lot of it's probably bullshit, and I've been told, oh, well, that's all bullshit. But I think that there is something to the American spirit that goes back throughout history, and the artwork and just the flags and the outfits, like when you look at the American Revolution and the way they dressed and just the colors. I think it's very beautiful, and I have a lot of appreciation for that. And I love Americana music. I love the patriotic marches and like It's a Grand Old Flag and songs like that. I think that they're musically, it's really pure and really cool. And for a little while, I was collecting the sheet music of all those military marches and patriotic songs and stuff like that. And I really like that aspect of like Americana. I think it's really cool. So many people don't like it. I wish more people appreciated it. You know, if they did, I think people would take more pride in their country and not be ashamed to have pride in your country. And you know, like just the word nationalism is looked upon with such disdain now. You know, and I really don't think that there's anything wrong with nationalism per se. I mean, you can definitely go too far. I mean, where nationalism becomes like jingoism. Or, you know, people equate it with fascism, which is just terrible. It's terrible to think that if you're patriotic, that you're fascist. That is just, that's abhorrent. That is such a distortion of reality and truth. It's a perversion. It's disgusting. And when people do that, it angers me. You know, I'm not this like super freaking right wing, you know, nut job or whatever, you know, they want to call us. I just believe that America's beautiful and America's great. It really is a great country, and it hurts me to see what our own people are doing to this country, what Americans are doing to America. It's pitiful, and I hope it changes. I hope it turns around. I don't have a lot of hope for that, but I know how to survive in other countries. I speak 5 other languages, and I can survive, but I don't know about everybody else, you know. For the people who only speak English and have only spoke English their entire lives, they're going to have a really hard time if they ever have to go somewhere else. An American expat can get by. You know, you can move to France and you'll probably be okay, but you really want to go to France? I know I don't. That's not one of the languages I learned. I wouldn't want to learn French. To me, French, ugh, it's an icky sounding language. I'm sorry if you're French. Like, I haven't appreciated. Like, if I see a really hot girl speaking French, it's pretty hot. I do admit. But a man speaking French, no, I don't like the way that language sounds. I'm not gonna stoop or condescend to like imitate it. But I've thought about learning French just to be able to understand it, but I can't bring myself to do it. I start trying to pronounce the words. I'm like, ugh, I don't like it. I never liked Spanish, honestly. Like the reason I don't like Spanish. I'll explain this. The reason I don't like Spanish, the Spanish language, is because it's pretty close to Italian, but it's not as beautiful as Italian. Italian is a beautiful language. Spanish is more of a corrupted form of Latin than Italian is. And I'll get into this a little bit. Okay, the word Latino. They say Latino. Latino means a Spanish-speaking person. A Hispanic person is Latino. Or Latina, whatever. Latinx. Why is that? Why is an Italian not Latino? Latin doesn't refer to your race or your nationality. Well, it's more race than it is nationality, because Latino could be someone from Argentina, someone from Chile, someone from Venezuela, someone from Mexico, someone from Spain. They're Latino. But someone from Italy is not Latino. Because why? Because they don't speak Spanish. Italian is closer to Latin than Spanish is. Okay? I'm sorry, it's just the truth. Spanish was very much corrupted by the Moorish occupation. The Moors occupied Spain for a long time, and their language had a huge impact on the Spanish language and changed it irrevocably. Okay, irrevocably. Italian is the closest language that we have to the original Latin. Okay, because nobody goes around speaking Latin, but Italian sounds like Latin. Spanish does not sound like Latin. Okay, but Spanish and Italian sound pretty close. They're all related. Okay, but why is it that Spanish-speaking people are Latino, but Italians are not? And obviously, it has to do with skin color. Okay, so like, if you're brown skin and you speak Spanish, then you're Latino. But if you're white and you are Italian, you're not Latino. Because I don't know if it has to do with being a minority or what, but it's strange to me how the word Latino, which means Latin, which pertains to language, by the way, not to, race or national origin or anything like that. It's language. Latin is a language. Latino means Latin. So, I don't really care. I'm not trying to be in the Latino club, but I'm an Italian American, and I just think it's funny how something that is a label for a language is used to represent a race. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me, especially since the Spanish and the Mexicans, they're like, if you were to look at them racially, they're very different, because obviously the Spanish has the Mexican has the Native American. It's basically half of the genome of the Mexican people is Native American. Spain doesn't have that. Okay, so they're actually probably closer to the Italians. I don't know, but who knows? I mean, I guess I went pretty far into that, but yeah, I think language is important, and I think the way we use language and the way that language affects culture, and we've got common usage, which brings in with it all these fallacies, because the whole idea that that the Hispanic people are Latino and the Italians are not is based on a logical fallacy. And but it's common usage, and it's just what people say. It's only language. It's only words. And I don't really care, because I'm not trying to fit into any club. I'm not trying to be viewed as a minority or any protected class or anything like that. I'm just a freaking white dude with an Italian last name. Who cares? Anyway, let's see. Anything else? More about language. What can I say about the other languages I've studied? Okay, I'll get into Russian a little bit. I always wanted to learn Russian. Let me cut the tape. I'm going to cut the tape and then I'll restart. Okay. My interest in Russian goes back to 1992, maybe even earlier. In 1992, we started getting Russian immigrants in Sacramento, a lot of them. After the Berlin Wall fell, many Russian, I would say religious refugees, came to Sacramento. Sacramento is a haven for Russian Protestants, Russian evangelicals, the Seventh-day Adventists, the Baptists, the what do you call them? The ones who speak in tongues. I can't remember. Pentecostals, Russian Pentecostals, Russian, just Protestants of all types, because the prevailing church in Russia is the Eastern Orthodox Church. It pervades most of their culture. The Protestants felt, in a way, it's almost like the Puritans of England that came to Massachusetts. They were seeking religious freedom. And I think in some ways, the Russian Protestants of the USSR wanted to seek that same religious freedom they didn't have at home. And so, therefore, in Sacramento, we have very, very many Russian Protestants. And they started coming in the early 90s, and I started noticing. In 1992, I had my first Russian classmate who didn't speak any English at all. And I remember talking to him, and I felt a certain kinship to him because I had lived in Europe and didn't speak English, although I went to an American school. I didn't speak English. I didn't speak the languages of the places I lived, except very minimally. And so I knew what it was like to be in a foreign country, to live in a foreign country, to move to a foreign country and not fit in, not speak the language so much. And so I had this Russian classmate in 11th grade. And he was a really cool guy. And I would ask him to teach me words. And I couldn't fucking make heads or tails of it. Russian is not related in any way, well, indirectly, to English. Russian has very few Latin antecedents in any of the words. Okay. Latin permeates all languages when it comes to medicine, technology, and religion. In most other ways, it doesn't. Okay. And so Russian is so detached from English. It was, to hear it was just something else. I didn't understand one word. Like if I was, like for instance, first time I heard Spanish, I understood a lot of it because I already knew some Italian. Okay. Okay. The boy is on his way. The mother's bringing the boy. Okay. So when I first started trying to pronounce Russian words, I felt like I was talking backwards, man. Like there would be like clusters of consonants. It's like that's how it sounded to me. Like I was like, fuck this shit, man. I can't learn this. It's not that I didn't like it. Don't get me wrong. I didn't hate it. And I didn't think it was ugly. I thought it was it's intimidating. Russian is an intimidating language. Especially once you start learning it. It's intimidating when you look at the alphabet. Let me tell you something about the Russian alphabet. Everybody says the same fucking thing. When I tell them I took Russian, they go, wow, learning Russian must be really hard. They have a different alphabet. And it's like, bitch, please. The Russian alphabet is the easiest part of their language. That's just the beginning. Okay, the Russian alphabet is the easiest part of Russian. And once you learn the Russian alphabet, you understand why they talk the way they do. Like their accent makes perfect sense when you think of it in terms of the Cyrillic alphabet. If you were to write American words using the Cyrillic alphabet, to pronounce them would sound like a Russian accent. So I understand. I totally understand. Russian is really hard because it's a case-sensitive language. You've got your nominative case, you have your accusative case, you have your genitive case, you have your prepositional case, you have your instrumental case, you have your dative case, and every case changes the form of the noun, of the adjective. I'm sure I'm missing something. Okay. It's been a little while. The structure of your sentence is going to change depending on what role each noun plays in the sentence. So if one noun is the subject and the other noun is the object, they're going to take on different forms. If you were to switch them, if you were to switch the forms, you change the meaning of the sentence. Because word order is not very important in Russian. What matters is case usage and how you construct your cases. And if you construct your cases wrong, it doesn't matter what order you put the words into, your sentence isn't going to make sense. You can take a Russian sentence and take the words, throw them in a hat, mix them up, and dump them on the ground, and the sentence means the same thing. It doesn't matter the word order, because you understand that this particular noun is the subject, and that this other noun is either the direct object, the indirect object, or the instrument being used, or the place where this thing took place. And all the adjectives adhere to each noun in that case, within that case. And so the adjective changes according to the noun. And so you know that the subject adjective pertains to the subject by the case that's being used. And so word order in Russian is not very important. Another thing you find with Russian, they don't have articles like the and like a, like, you know how we say a bicycle or the bicycle. They don't even have that word. It's not even needed. And it's just a really strange fucking language, and it's not constructed the same way that English is. So when you are an American speaking person and you go to learn Russian, you're basically doing calculus in your head in order to construct a sentence that makes any sense at all. And you listen to the kids, like a Russian 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and they're talking, it's like, well, if they can do it, I should be able to do it. No, it's not so easy, because they don't learn how to speak Russian. They start speaking Russian. I learned that in my psychology class. It's like you don't learn how to walk, you start walking. Okay. There are abilities that are learned, and there are abilities that are, I don't know if you say gained, but there's certain things you have to learn how to do, and there's certain things you just start doing. Talking is one of those things that you just start doing. Because even somebody who is mentally handicapped can speak their own language. It depends on how handicapped they are, I guess. But anyway, so Russian is a very intimidating language. And it sounds intimidating in the same way that German sounds intimidating. When you hear German and they're like, Horken, Schlorken, Wieder, Gorken, you know, it sounds like they're really mad at you. Like, it's pretty daunting. Like, if you got some guy like, I remember the train conductor one time coming in and yelling at this guy who didn't have his ticket, and I was like, fuck, that dude's fucking scary, man. He looked like a pig in a cop uniform, you know, like he was this big fat guy with a red face, and he's screaming at this dude who didn't have his ticket, and he was like just going off in German. And I was like, man, that language is pretty fucking scary, dude. Like, it's an authoritative language. Even without, you know, like, people will stereotype it, you know, with the whole, like, Nazi movement and stuff like that. I don't think of it in that terms, because, like, when I grew up in Germany, I didn't grow up with the image of the Nazis. Like, that wasn't something that was... That's not part of their culture. You go over to Germany, you don't see like Nazi shit everywhere. You know, that is obviously a very regrettable aspect of history. It's something that many of them are deeply ashamed of, and if you want to make friends in Germany, you don't go over there and start talking about Nazis, okay? And there probably are still some Nazis there. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are some people there who like to go against the, the prevailing good taste of, normal humans, and probably, those are people who have serious problems, obviously. Man, I am getting uncomfortable. I'm going to make myself comfortable. I don't care. We're hanging out, all right? You can hang with me, or you can hang up. You can hang up the phone. I don't care. It's not my problem. I'm just here talking. I'm here to entertain you a little bit. I'm talking about language here. That's the focus of. Usually I talk about books. Today I'm not talking about books. I'm talking about my personal history of living overseas. Okay, and I was talking about German. German sounds scary. It sounds authoritative. Russian is kind of the same way. I will draw a similarity here. It's fucking cold in Russia. Okay? If you go to Russia, bring your jacket. Okay? If you don't bring your jacket, if you go to live in Russia and you don't know how to build a fire or you don't know how to survive in the snow, you're probably going to fucking die. All right? So, I think that if you are going to be a complete person and, if you plan to assimilate in Russia, you have to learn to deal with the cold weather because it's really cold there. Germany's pretty cold, but Germany's more cold and rainy. It's kind of like living in. I lived in Portland for a while. Very similar to Germany. German people, they're cold and they're wet. They're not exactly happy. They have very little tolerance for bullshit. They don't smile at you. They don't have tolerance for inefficiency. Is a good word. Germans are very efficient people. They're efficient workers. They're efficient engineers. Their culture reflects that. Okay. When you go to Germany and you go to a little village and you see like a rock wall that has been erected like in a certain part of town, you can bet your boots that rock wall's been there for over 100 years and will still be here 100 years from now. You don't get that in the States. You don't get that in America. When we build something, it's built to tear down. It's built with the idea that this land is probably going to be owned by somebody else in another 15 years and that this structure that we have built here is easily torn down and something else built in its place. Everything's very temporary in America. When they develop a neighborhood or they develop a shopping center, it's meant to be temporary. It's meant to be sort of plastic, sort of I don't know if liquid or plastic is the right word, but it's plastic. It's meant to be plastic, and not plastic in a literal sense, like not the material plastic, but it's plastic in the sense that it's pliable and it can be moved around and shuffled and redealt. And Germany's just not like that. If you go to Germany, everything's very permanent. You go there, you'll see a cathedral that's been there for 1,000 years. That's how crazy it is. And so Germany is they're serious and they're permanent. Like when they do something, they mean it. Okay, it's not like America. They're not flakes. Okay, compared to Germans, Americans are flakes, especially Californians. I've been living in California now for 30. How many years? About 33 years. I've been living in California, and yeah, there's some flaky motherfuckers out here. And when I first moved here, I was very, very shocked by people and people's attitudes. When I lived in Germany, we valued our neighbors. It wasn't because of the Germans. It was because we were Americans living in Germany. And we had to depend on each other quite a bit. Like, it wasn't uncommon to go down to your neighbors. Well, I remember my dad would ask me to go to our upstairs neighbor's house and ask for 2 rolls of toilet paper and a pack of cigarettes. And he would pay him back, of course. But they had a rapport going. They had trust. And so he was always sending me to borrow toilet paper and cigarettes from the neighbor, which I think is funny. And so you came to depend on your neighbors quite a bit. Anybody who you knew that spoke English was valuable. Anybody who you knew who spoke English was a potential friend, was somebody who you didn't want to fuck things up with. You didn't burn those bridges. If somebody spoke English, think about that. If somebody spoke English, you did not want to fuck that up. That connection that you have with that person. Because it could mean the difference between not having any toilet paper and cigarettes. And that's important, man. Because you need cigarettes, right? I smoked when I started smoking when I was 11 years old. I was 11. I was in 6th grade when I decided to start smoking. I was smoking anyway because our parents used to smoke in the house. I mean, back then, that's just what parents did. You think parents went outside to smoke so their kids wouldn't have to inhale it? Fuck no. People today are so coddled, man. Like, man, I know I'm boomering out. I'm totally boomering out here. But anybody who expects their parents to go outside and have a cigarette so the kids don't have to breathe secondhand smoke, they didn't have that when I was a kid. There was no such thing. The parents smoked in the car. If you were lucky, they'd roll the window down. I remember my dad rolling the window down and flicking his ashes out the window, and those ashes would come back into my window and hit me in the face. So, yeah, I mean, these Zoomers, they never experienced that. Being cooped up in a smoky house. And then if our parents found out we were smoking, they beat the shit out of us, okay? So, like, my dad's beating the shit out of me for catching me smoking. And he's like, where do you learn this shit? I learned it from you, Dad. You know, I was addicted to smoking already before I even started smoking. I was already addicted to nicotine because I inhaled it secondhand for 11 straight years before that. So that's why we all started smoking. We were finally giving in to our craving that we had because we were already addicted. And so I stole my dad's cigarettes. He smoked these Benson and Hedges Lights 100s. I was like, fuck that. I need Camels. I don't know why. Like, parents, they think that, like, they're not doing that much harm to themselves if they start smoking some 100s Light, you know, whatever. I don't know how that all that got started. Like, the fucking filter's like that long. It's like, that's half of the cigarette right there. Like, I remember when I started smoking, okay, in Germany, they had cigarette machines. Just, you'd be walking down the street, you know, that rock wall that is 100 years old, that's part of your village, has a cigarette machine on the wall. I guess the cigarette machine's probably been there almost 100 years, but they have cigarette machines out in public. And so all you have to do is, like, okay, that's how freaking old I am. They didn't have the euro. There was no euros back then. It was Deutschmarks. And so you put 4 marks. You get two mark pieces. You put it in the machine. And you get a pack of cigarettes. It didn't matter how old you are. They didn't ask for your ID. Okay? Nowadays, they probably, if they had a cigarette machine, they could probably card you. And, like, no, back then, you just get a pack of cigarettes from the machine. And so that's how we did it. And so, of course, we started smoking Marlboro Reds. That was the first thing we smoked. I moved to Camels eventually. But one of the things that when you're a military personnel get a ration card. And so they could buy cheap cigarettes, but they can only buy 4 cartons a month. And so some people, they would kind of pool their resources, and like one guy would trade, you know, like he would let one guy like use his ration card or he would buy the cigarettes and they would sell them to their friends that wanted more. So some people actually had like 8 cartons a month. And I had a friend named Danny, and his parents let him smoke, and he was 12. And so he smoked in his house. And so I would go over to his house and smoke. And of course I went home reeking like cigarettes. But my dad couldn't smell it because he was a smoker. But Danny smoked Lucky Strikes because they were, get this, $2 a carton. So back in those days, with a ration card, this is the reason that they rationed them, is because military personnel got cheap cigarettes. That's a benefit of being in the military. If you want to join the army, you get some cheap cigarettes. So like that was the thing. It's like you could like at that time in like 1987, a carton of Camels was $5, maybe 5.50, $7 at the most. I think it was five something for a carton of Camels, and the Camels were. I mean, that was like the top tier. That was those were your blue chips. Was your Camels and your Marlboros. So I started smoking Marlboros, and then I moved to Camels eventually. And remember when like Camel cigarettes would like advertise for kids? Like they have like these cartoons, and you get Camel bucks, Camel dollars, and you get Marlboro miles. Um, all these incentives, and you could like order like some like river faring like gear, like you could order some lawn chairs or like a cooler or something with your Marlboro miles, a T-shirt. You get a T-shirt with a Marlboro man on it. And then there was Joe Camel, and that's where they were like, oh no, they're selling cigarettes. They're advertising for children, because you had this Joe Camel who was like this camel with sunglasses on. He's like, oh, I'm Joe Camel, this cool camel, and they'd sit around with their loungewear. But my friend Danny got the Lucky Strikes because they were $2 a carton for a carton of Lucky Strikes, and they would keep them in their freezer. And so you pull out these frozen cigarettes, and when you light up a frozen cigarette. Oh my gosh, it's something else. I mean, I quit smoking when I was 20 years old. I haven't smoked in 27 years. But I started when I was 11. So I don't know what kind of long-lasting health effects that's going to have. Like, who knows if I'm just going to get cancer from those cigarettes I smoked when I was 12. But I was smoking cigarettes and drinking in bars when I was 12 years old. So I'll leave it at that. My son's going to be here any minute. But yeah, it's been fun.